Wish you all good morning. I hope the sound is adequate today. I turned a few buttons and tweaked a few things, so I hope that the sound volume is adequate for you this morning. I will try to speak up as well so that no one has to strain to hear. Good morning, Malini Preeti. Good morning, Govinda Dave. Om Agana Timirandasya Gana Gana Salakya Chaksuran Meditam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Maha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutare Sayam Rupakaramayam Tarati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamaram Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Sri Rupam Sagatatam Sahagana Raganatam Bitam Stam Sajevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Ladita Sri Vishakan Bitam Scha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamani Namaste Sarasati Deva Gauravani Pachari Nevashes Sunnivari Paskadade Sadani Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sri Gaur Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Thank you, Govinda, who says everything is coming through loud and clear. Narayanam namaskritam naram cheva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayo dhyarayatnashta prayasho bhadresu nityam bhagavata sevya bhagavatiyotam ashoki bhaktir bhavati naistiki nigama kapaturu garitam phalam shukam okaramita dravisamitam pibata bhagavatam rashamarya mahora hora sika bhubi babakaha. Welcome, Prashant, Sundari Priya, Malini Preeti, Rupa Manjari. Thank you all for joining me on this Wisdom Wednesday. Prashant again. This will be the last of our series of 3 shows for this week. And when we resume the Bhagavatam Roundtable series of morning classes, next Monday will be the auspicious occasion of Balaram Jayanti. Yes, give me some thumbs up for that. We're going, if you're in Utah, in commuting distance, we'll gather in the evening at the Salt Lake City Temple for Abhishek and talk Kirtan honoring the appearance day of Lord Balaram. This is a festival season. Balaram Jayanti, Balaram Purnima is next Monday. Janmashtami will be 8 days later, the following Tuesday, and then Radhastami occurs later on this month. A very, very holy, auspicious time of the year. We're going to conclude. We spent, there's so much nectar here. Practically speaking, our modus operandus has been to take all 3 days, Motivational Monday, Transcendental Tuesday, and Wisdom Wednesday on a single verse. We did that last week. I think we did it the week before. And we're following the same pattern this week. This will be the third section. Good morning, Jimmy from Minnesota. Hare Krishna. The third time we're talking about the same verse in this week, and it is the 30th verse, 2nd chapter, 1st canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. At this rate, it'll take us 1,000 years by the calculation of the demigods to finish the Srimad Bhagavatam. But we're not missing any nectar. We're squeezing all the drops that we possibly can out of the nectarine lotus feet of the Lord as we go along. So for the third time this week, the verse is in the Sanskrit, Sa evadam sasa jaragre bhagavan atma maya sad asad rupaya chasho guna maya guna vibhu. In the beginning of material creation, that absolute personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, in his transcendental position, created the energies of cause and effect by his own internal energy. And for the third time this week, this short 1-paragraph purport, Prabhupada says, the position of the Lord is always transcendental. And I love this turn of phrase because the causal and effectual energies required for the creation of the material world were also created by him. He is unaffected, therefore, by the qualities of the material modes. His existence, form, activities, and paraphernalia all existed before the material creation. He is all spiritual and has nothing to do with the qualities of the material world, which are distinct from the spiritual qualities of the Lord. And here's one phrase that we're going to carry over from the past because I just love the way this is described. How can the jiva, that's us, parts of the Lord, tiny infinitesimal emanations from the Lord, We're spirit, God is spirit. Qualitatively equal, but the quantity is different. He's all powerful, and we have powers. We have borrowed powers from him, but they're limited. We have cognizance, but it's limited. So it says the limited intellectual function of the jiva, again, that's you and I, is always contaminated by the influence of time and space, and is therefore not in a position to shake off this limitedness. We are eternal, we're cognizant, but our cognizance is limited to this body, which is fixed in time and space. And that means that so far our ability to realize the pure, uncaused, absolute truth is contaminated and limited by our position in time and space. We talked yesterday quite extensively about Lord Brahma, who is no less a personality than the creator of this particular universe, as well as the speaker from each one of his four mouths of the four Vedas, and he's also the Acharya, the founder of our disciplic succession, the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya. And yet he says, although he's the supreme creator within the universe, although he knows everything that's going on in the universe, he knows every living being, he's fully cognizant and fully omniscient as far as this universe is concerned. He is recognized as the supreme penitent. He did austerities, tapasya, for 1,000 years by the calculation of the demigods when he originally emerged out of the dark on top of the lotus flower. He's recognized as the topmost of all yogis, the greatest of all scholars. And he says, I with all of those credentials to my name, Brahma, PhD, 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 still I cannot know him, the very source of my birth. Brahma finally, of course, becomes self-realized, not through austerities, not through penances, not through philosophically studying the Vedas, but through devotion. In his own composition, the Brahma Samhiti says, Vedashu Durlabham Adarabham Atma Bhakto, who is Durlabham, impossible to obtain even by studying the length and breadth of the Vedic scriptures, is Adurlabham, very easily attained by pure devotional service under the direction of a spiritual master. So, though Brahma was unable to become God conscious through all of his other accomplishments, he did become God conscious. He is the leader of our line of disciplic succession. He's our guru, he's our preceptor, because he applied this principle. Bhakta tu ananya sakya aham evam vidar gabadrastam javapiram pravesam cha parantapa. Krishna says to Arjuna, this is the key. This is what unlocks the door. Bhakti tu ananya sakya, through undivided, uninterrupted devotion, service to me, surrender to my lotus feet, who becomes a friend to me, who can see me standing before you face to face in the same way that Krishna's intimate friend and eternal associate Arjuna is standing face to face before him. In conversations with Krishna, I've often heard them quote a biblical phrase which says, no man has seen God. Well, maybe nobody did see God in that day and time. Maybe nobody had the qualification. Maybe nobody had served him in the authorized devotional way. Nobody had the bhakti. But that does not mean to say that nobody has never, ever seen God, because we have countless testimonies, countless narrations of purified, rarefied souls throughout the ages and throughout the universe who have seen God face to face. It's not an issue, it's not debatable that God can be seen face to face. We can't see him by the powers of our penances and austerities or philosophy. We don't have the wherewithal to ascend to a level which is face to face with God. But he, being unlimited, can bend down and come face to face with us. However, we have to be full with love and devotion and completely free of envy. And all that can be attained in the association and the service of a bona fide spiritual master. Outside of the service of the spiritual master in the disciplic succession, it's durbam, it's impossible to know God. Prabhupada says here, persons with tiny brains within this petty planet, Earth, think of the Lord as one of them. When you read about Krishna having appeared and been on the planet for 125 years and participated in all the adventures of the Mahabharata and spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, one automatically thinks of Krishna as a mortal, thinks of Krishna as a historical personality, thinks of Krishna as being within the cause and effect of karma, thinks of Krishna as having a material body, and thinks of the wisdom that Krishna spoke to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita as a relative treatise of knowledge. Therefore, one misses the whole point. Prabhupada calls these mundane, speculative, philosophical wranglers who consciously or unconsciously become offenders, who deride the Lord by lowering him to the position of an ordinary or even an extraordinary historical personality. Krishna condemns the non-devotional consciousness, the speculative philosophical approach very thoroughly in the 11th verse of the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Avajananti mam mudha manasim tanam asvita parambhama janato mamavyamadutam. Though may have a degree from MIT, though they may be a Nobel laureate, though they may have PhDs after their name, without the devotion, daring or presuming to comment on Krishna, without following the prescription of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita to understand him, one is a fool. Not coming from me, it's coming from the Supreme Personality of God in himself. Fools deride me, minimize me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be. And that's why Maharaj Parikshit sets an ideal example for seriously inquisitive people. Maharaj Parikshit sits patiently in front of his guru Sukadeva Goswami, and rather than jumping right to the pastimes of Krishna, he starts at the beginning, at the creation. Janmadi asya yataha navayatish itadishtartishu shragara. Parikshit says, my dear Guru, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's not be presumptuous. How did Krishna create? What is the nature of the absolute truth from which everything came? And they went systematically through the first 9 cantos of the Bhagavatam before finally arriving at the 10th canto, the transcendental pastimes of Krishna with the gopis and the gopas. It is said that the neophyte devotee, instead of jumping at once to the platform of transcendental pastimes, which are wholly within the internal energy of the Lord, have nothing to do with the actions and interactions of this material world, says, rather than jumping to those pastimes, do your homework, put in your hours, pay your dues, and inquire about the creative energy of the Lord. And only when one knows Lord Krishna's greatness in terms of creativity, then can one move ahead or graduate to unflinching faith in him and transcendental knowledge of him. Prabhupada used to say, just about any culture, however primitive it might be, in the history of the world, has some idea that God is great. But he said, you need to come to the Bhagavatam, to the 9 cantos of the Bhagavatam to find out how great God is. And if you are so foolish as to put aside the guidance and teachings of a bona fide spiritual master and jump right to the 10th canto, then you still completely miss it. You'll completely miss the greatness of God and take it in the opposite way, hearing about the pastimes of Krishna and the gopis and all. You'll make the mistaken conclusion that Krishna is an ordinary, historical, living being. That's why they said, Yasha Deve Para Bhakti Uditaya Devi Tata Guru Katita Hyata Prakasante Mahatmana. If you want the position of Krishna to become very, very clear to you, like the noonday sun, which does not support any shadows or any doubt or any confusion, then you have to take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. And no bona fide spiritual master will ever take you directly to the 10th canto. Prabhupada didn't arrive in America until he was already 70 years old. He knew that his time with us was limited. And the first volumes of the Bhagavatam he brought, first ones he translated and had published, were the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam in 3 volumes. And he wanted to present to his disciples systematically the first 9 cantos, should he have had that amount of lifespan allotted to him, but he wasn't sure. And so therefore, after having written and commented and published the first canto, one of the first things he did after coming to America was he translated the 10th canto with all the philosophical understanding and support and published the Krishna book. He got George Harrison to give a donation for publishing the Krishna book, because he thought, if I should pass away before having given to the world the first 9 cantos, then the field will be open for all kinds of unscrupulous people then to put in the 10th canto and to mislead people in general. So the Krishna book is the 10th canto, but it's presented in such a way that you will never misunderstand Krishna. So never jump to the 10th canto, but you have our permission to go ahead and read the Krishna book if you're curious to know about the pastimes of Krishna, and you'll not in any way be misled whatsoever. So it requires a certain focus, it requires a certain process and a certain protocol as prescribed by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, any other posture is sure to mislead one and most likely cause one to create offenses either at Krishna or the lotus feet of Krishna's devotees. So speaking of minimizing Krishna's position or the position of Krishna's devotees, we wanted to talk a bit today about Lord Shiva. Yesterday we talked about Lord Brahma and how he is a devotee of Krishna, and Shiva is also special in a number of different ways. It is said, Yashtu Narayanam Devam Brahma Rudra Trisham Shamat Benaiva Vikshata Sapa Sandi Bhavedruvam. Said if someone worships Brahma and Shiva on the level of Lord Krishna, then one is a Pashandi, basically an unbeliever and an atheist. However, it's important to note that the people who worship Brahma and Shiva do so for material benefits. They do so by exaggerating the position of the demigods and minimizing the position of Krishna and lumping them all into one, and ultimately coming to a conclusion that the absolute truth is impersonal. In other parts of the commentaries of Srila Prabhupada, he says that if you're a devotee of Krishna, you have to worship Shiva. Devotees of Krishna cannot neglect Lord Shiva for a couple of important reasons. One is that Lord Shiva is Krishna. He's a plenary expansion of Krishna, just like milk and yogurt are the same basic thing. They're both milk products, they're both equivalent. The only distinction is that from milk you can get yogurt, but from yogurt you can't get milk. So from Krishna you get Shiva, but from Shiva you can't get Krishna. But they're equivalent in many ways. That Shiva is Krishna, however, Shiva is Krishna in touch with and in charge of the lower mode of material nature, Tamagun. So we don't worship Krishna's aspect of Shiva as supreme because of his association with the mode of ignorance, ghosts, bhutas, hobgoblins, and madmen. That's his compassion, that's his mercy. Lord Shiva is Krishna's mercy, potency to give all of these bizarre personalities some sort of guidance, some sort of focus, context, and shelter. So we don't worship Lord Shiva on the same level as we worship Lord Krishna, but we recognize that in many ways he's not different from Krishna. And so those who worship Lord Krishna do not neglect Lord Shiva. Now, another important reason why we would worship Lord Shiva is that it is our practice as Vaishnavas to worship the devotees of Krishna. Shiva himself, when he's asked in the Padma Puranam by his wife Parvati, what or who is the most worshipable entity within the universe, he tells his wife, Aradhanam Sarvesham, of all types of worship, Vishnu Aradhanam Param. The worship of Vishnu is the best, better than worship of me, better than worship of Lord Brahma, better than worship of the demigods. And then he says, Tajma Parataram Devi, but higher than the worship of Vishnu, Tadiyadam Samacharam, is worship of Vishnu's devotees. So Lord Shiva says, better than worship me is worship of Lord Vishnu, but we say, yes, worship of Shiva is good as long as you worship Lord Shiva as a devotee of Krishna and ask for his mercy so that you can also become devoted to Lord Krishna. And Shiva in that sense is worshipable as a devotee. We worship Lord Prabhupada, we worship Bhaktisiddhanta, we worship Bhaktivinoda, we worship the Goswamis, we worship Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So you can hardly worship all those devotees and neglect Lord Shiva, who is called Vaishnavanam Yatashambhu, the greatest devotee. And being a great devotee and fixed in Krishna consciousness, when his wife Parvati heard about a great sacrifice that was being performed in her hometown by her father, Daksha, at which her sisters and her brothers-in-laws would be present, she could hardly resist the temptation to go. She approached her husband, Lord Shiva, and said, can I go to this sacrifice? Lord Shiva, immediately alarm bells started going off in his head. Parvati said, I want to go see my father, I want to go see my sisters, I want to go see my aunts, I want to go see my cousins, and I want to visit the place of my birth again. This created alarm bells in Lord Shiva's mind. Parvati is a liberated soul, otherwise she couldn't be the consort of Lord Shiva. But just as Arjuna played the role of someone in illusion in the Bhagavad Gita, Parvati is playing a certain role here so that we can learn from her course of action. Yashatma buddhi kunape tridahaduke, those who are hardly enlightened, think of the elements of this body, mucus, bile, and phlegm, as being the self. Shwadihi kaladradishu bomit jadihi. They think of the byproducts of this body in terms of children and relatives and so on and so forth as extensions of the self. Boma ijadihi yatirta buddhi salatena karichit. They think of the place of their birth as worshipable, and in this way they fail to distinguish between spirit and matter. That's obviously not the case with Parvati, but she's got these impulses, she's got these temporal longings, and so she asks Lord Krishna, being influenced by these modes of thinking, if she can't just go for a short visit to attend the sacrifice performed by Daksha. And Lord Shiva knows the nature of his father-in-law, who is fully identified with the body, with his children, with the land of his birth, who thinks of the body as the self. And in this way, hardly can Daksha understand the prominence of Lord Shiva. It says that Parvati asked to go see her father, and Lord Shiva countered by asking her not to go see her father because he is very much under the influence of the external material energy. Lord Shiva has no regard for the external material energy. He sits aloof in a secluded place with his Rudraksha beads. He chants the names of Krishna. He's fully absorbed in thoughts of the internal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore he advises Parvati not to go there, not to visit her father, because her father is envious of Lord Shiva. Her father, being totally sold out to the material energy, thinks that Lord Shiva is wasting his time living in the Himalayas, performing meditation, and Lord Shiva knows that his father-in-law Daksha is wasting his time being preoccupied in family, friends, and country. At this point, I'm moved to share a little bit of rap song with you. It's a composition by MC Yogi. But can you show me a little love first there on the screen? And this way I'll be inspired to share some rap lyrics that I've learned in the course of time. It's something you can bring up at the Color Festival by way of making connections with young people today. Oh, there we go. There we go. I bow to Shiva with love and respect. I invoke him with this slogan because I'm open to connect. In devotion because he's always in effect. In deep meditation with a snake around his neck. He's the husband of Parvati, Mahashakti. He rides the white bull, the vehicle Nandi. He's the father of Ganapati, Mr. Mahadev. The Ganges flows down from the crown of his head. A crescent moon rests right next to his dreads. He's the god of dead, covered in ash, with a smile on his face, and his compassion is vast. He lives in Mount Kailash, also known as his Himalayan home, and in the shape of a lingam, he's a rolling stone. Om Namo Shivaya, Shivaya Namo. Om Namo Shivaya, Shivaya Namo. To Shiva Shankar, the yoga master, also known as Nataraj, the cosmic dancer. He's the lord of destruction, the god of disaster. If you don't invite him in, he's the party crasher. He's the old school mystic, is Krishna dualistic. He shifts my mind from a place that's materialistic to a space that's more holistic. He's the magnetic ascetic who makes my soul shine. He awakens the snake at the base of the spine. Third eye wide open in yoga pose. He focuses my mind so the petals unfold in deep concentration with breath control. He worships Lord Vishnu by chanting his names as the Ganges drains to the sea as bhakti flows to his lotus feet. Om Namo Shivaya, Shivaya Namo. Om Namo Shivaya, Shivaya Namo. Om Namo Shivaya, the flames get higher as the corpse gets burned on the funeral pyre. The soul never dies, she won't expire when it's time to die. Just release the satire, exhale to let go of selfish desire. May my soul aspire to shine brightly like Shiva Nataraj, dancing on a demon in the burning ring of fire. Mahadev said your pure auspiciousness, also known as truth, conscious, and bliss, creating, devastating, transformating. You save the whole world when you swallow the poison, destroy bad habits, ignorance, and greed, practicing detachment, compassion, and peace. To the Lord of meditation who lives in the Himalayas, to the King of all yogis, I offer these prayers. Om Namo Shivaya, Shivaya Namo. Om Namo Shivaya, Shivaya Namo. Om Namo Shivaya, Shivaya Namo. Thank you very much. That's a composition by MC Yogi about the glories of our subject today, Lord Shiva. However, counterpoint to Lord Shiva is Daksha, who minimizes the stature of Lord Shiva, who disregards the devotees of Lord Shiva. Thank you very much for all of your hearts there. Certainly inspiring for me. Bhagavad Gita, such as Daksha, are described in the 9th chapter, 12th verse. Moga sho, moga kamano, moga jnana, vichedasha, rakshasima sarim chaiva, prakritim mohanam sitaha. Those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demoniac and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. So it is a great offense to consider that the deity of Krishna is made of stone or wood, that the spiritual master, the devotee, is an ordinary man. This is called hellish mentality. That is the mentality of Daksha. And Parvati going to visit Daksha, having come from Lord Shiva, whom he disregarded and disrespected, was a formula for disaster. And of course, most of you are listening know the sad end to this story. So such as Daksha are certainly deluded because they cannot understand, they haven't undergoing the bona fide process for understanding the eternal form of Krishna, or Krishna, of course, in the form of Lord Shiva. It goes so far as to say in a section of the Chaitanya Charitam that one who considers the body of Krishna to be material and a spiritual master like Lord Shiva to be an ordinary man should be disqualified from performing and even driven out from participating in all rituals of the Shruti and Smriti. And if by chance one sees his face, one should at once take bath in the Ganges to rid himself of the infection. We mentioned last week about one of Lord Chaitanya's students who tried to assert that chanting the names of Shiva and Brahma resulted in the same material fruit of benefits of chanting the name of Krishna, Lord Chaitanya banned that student from ever coming back to his school and went from that spot, immediately jumped into the Ganges River with all of his clothes on to indicate that we should have nothing to do with such a person. This is the demoniac mentality. Asuram yonamapana mudi janmani janmani mama prapya vakanteya tato yanti adavam gatim. With such a mentality, one will attain repeated birth amongst the species of demoniac life. One will be prevented from ever approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead, gradually sinking down to the level of the cats and dogs, the most abominable positions of material existence. People who jeer, who deride, who minimize the position of Krishna's devotees do so because they are envious of Krishna's devotees. And such envious persons are sheltered by none other than Lord Shiva himself. Being Krishna in charge of the mode of tamagun, the mode of ignorance, it is Lord Shiva's job to associate with these deluded, confused, maddened, and dangerous energies to give them shelter, with the idea of gradually rectifying them to the level of devotional service. One such person who lived in ancient times was a demon named Vrikasura. His father was named Sakuni. Vrikasura once met Narada Muni, the great sage, on the road and asked him which of the three gods, Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, or Shiva the destroyer, could be most easily pleased. Narada Muni said, Lord Shiva is always absorbed in the internal potency of the Lord. He has nothing to do with the external material potency. And so when people approach him for a boon, all he wants to do is get rid of them as fast as possible. He's annoyed. He's upset on a mild level that they have intruded upon his constant meditation on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. And so in order to get rid of them and get back to his chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare, without even hearing what they're asking him, without even considering whether the request is good for them or bad for them, without considering whether it's something which will be beneficial to people in general or whether it's something demoniac meant to cause people pain or suffering. Lord Shiva just says, yeah, take it and go and leave me alone. And so Vrikasura, being informed by Narada Muni, and Narad's always stirring the pot. He's always making things happen, turning up the heat. So Vrikasura identifies Lord Shiva as the one who's most easily pleased, and he has the most wicked of motives. And so he engages in severe austerities in order to get the attention of Lord Shiva. Even I believe it's mentioned that he goes so far as to cut the flesh from his body, result of which is that Lord Shiva thinks, why is he mutilating himself like this? And he forces Lord Shiva to appear before him, and then he asks Lord Shiva, can you give me the boon that whoever's head I touch, it will burst into a million pieces? And Lord Shiva says, yeah, I get it. Let me get back to my meditation. Well, unfortunately, no sooner did Vrikasura get the boon from Lord Shiva, the head breaking, head exploding, touching boon, than he started after Lord Shiva to touch Lord Shiva's head, because the Vrikasura demon was lusty after Lord Shiva's wife Parvati. Now, Lord Shiva ran here and there with Vrikasura, chasing him, trying to touch his head with his finger out. And Lord Vishnu intervened on behalf of Lord Shiva. Krishna says, Tsipram bhavati dharma sasuktan konti apatichen nami bhakti pranasati. Who is devoted to me never perishes. Krishna always is cognizant of and protective of his pure devotee. Whenever a pure devotee is in trouble, Krishna intervenes on behalf of that devotee. So he saw that his great devotee, Lord Shiva, was in trouble here. And the reason that he gave the benediction in the first place was that he didn't want to further interrupt his worship of Krishna and his chanting of Krishna's names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So of course Krishna is going to support him in his hour of peril. And what Krishna did was he appeared in the path of the demon as a young brahmachari, and he spoke to the demon in a very, very pleasing way, recognizing that the demons identify the body as the self. This young brahmachari, disguised manifestation of Lord Vishnu, he says, you must be very, very tired. You know, you've been running after Lord Shiva for such a long distance. You need to take care of your body, which is the self. Take a minute to rest. Here, sit down. Here's a nice comfortable seat. Have a glass of water. It says you have to take care of your body because it's through the body that we fill all desires. Then Krishna flatters him further by saying, oh, mighty one, oh, good-looking one, oh, movie star, tell us what it is that you intend to do, if you think that we're qualified to hear it. Oftentimes, when we have a great task in mind, it helps to take the advice and assistance of others. And so, when questioned by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in language that poured over Vrikasura like sweet nectar, he felt an immediate relief from his fatigue, and he described to the Lord the business that he was about. He wanted to touch the head of Lord Shiva, kill him, and then take his wife Parvati. So Krishna listened very attentively, very respectfully to this narration and responded in the following way. He said, my dear sir, if this is the case, I'm not sure that you can believe what Shiva says. Shiva has been known to mislead, to misguide. Shiva was cursed by Daksha to associate with hobgoblins and bhutas and ghosts and pishachas. So consider his unsavory associates, all of whom are liars and cheaters and madmen. I'm not sure that you can have any faith in the promise of Lord Shiva. I think you should test his word by putting your hand on his head and see what happens. And when you put your hand on your head and it doesn't work, then you can personally kill this liar who is known as Lord Shiva. And the demon was just totally hypnotized, totally controlled by the words of the Lord, who is both Bahir Anta, who is both outside and within. Krishna is seated within the heart of every living entity, so he can prompt the living being in any way that he wants from within inside. Vrikasura was totally convinced. He figured the logic was absolutely perfect. He said, yeah, you're right. I'll touch my head, and then I'll prove Lord Shiva to be a liar, and then I'll kill him. And he touched his head, and it burst into 1,000 pieces. After saving Lord Shiva from this great danger, Krishna spoke these words, "O Mahadev." He wasn't trying to be patronizing or condescending. He wasn't pointing out to Lord Shiva that he'd been his savior. He wasn't trying to diminish the position of Lord Shiva. In fact, the first words that Lord Vishnu says to Lord Shiva are, "O Mahadev," the greatest of all the demigods. He says, and he follows that. He says, just see, "O Mahadev, my Lord." And Krishna is calling Shiva, his devotee, my Lord. He says, how this wicked man has been killed by his own sinful actions. Lord Vishnu is not taking credit for having killed Vrikasura. He's not taking credit for having saved Lord Shiva. He doesn't want Lord Shiva's position to be minimized. He doesn't want Lord Shiva to feel mortified in any way whatsoever. And so he says, he describes the death of Vrikasura. He's died by his own sinful reactions. And he goes on to say, indeed, what living being can hope for good fortune if he offends exalted saints? What to speak of offending the Lord and spiritual master of the universe? Lord Vishnu addresses Lord Shiva as the Lord and spiritual master of the universe. And his greatness consists in the fact that he is a plenary portion of Lord Vishnu, that he is the greatest Vaishnava, he is the greatest servants of Lord Vishnu. He is always meditating upon Lord Vishnu in the form of Shankarshan. He takes on the responsibility on behalf of Lord Vishnu for the destruction of this material world. He becomes the patron saint of all the madmen and hobgoblins and ghosts who are in the mode of ignorance. So he is Lord Vishnu himself, but insofar as he's in charge of the mode of ignorance, he's called Tamashi. The Lord Shiva is the incarnation of Vishnu in touch with Tamagun. However, Lord Shiva himself and his worshipable deity of Shankarshan are always in a position of enlightenment. They're always in the transcendental position. They ultimately, at the end of the day, have nothing to do with the material nature, the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. But because their activities involve them in the mode of ignorance, they are sometimes referred to as Tamashi. On one occasion, just as Lord Vishnu is always protective of his devotees, as a devotee, Lord Shiva's looking for opportunities to do service to Lord Vishnu. Atasu Krishna Nababid Shevan Mukhi Jivado Shrayam Eva Sparatyadaha. The Supreme Lord cannot be directly approached because of his greatness, because of his separateness from the causality and effectiveness of this material world. However, he can be very easily known by those who use their God-given senses to render service to the Lord. The Lord Shiva is always on the lookout for an opportunity to render service to the Lord. Therefore, during the instance when the demons and the demigods were churning the ocean of milk, various substances were produced. And initially, before they got the desired purified substances, there were some unwanted byproducts that were produced. And one of them was a virulent poison called the Halhala poison. It was being extracted from the ocean of milk, and the poison, as well as its noxious fumes, were in danger of destroying and killing all living entities within the universe. Lord Shiva, being fully empowered as an incarnation and emanation of Krishna, and being at the same time a Vaishnava, a devotee of Krishna, on the lookout to doing some service, he thought, here is a task to which I am uniquely and ideally situated. I am powerful enough that this poison, which would otherwise destroy the universe, I can drink it myself and absorb all the toxins without any personal ill effects. So he jumped at the chance to do this service. He drank from the palm of his hand all of that poison with no other ill effect than that his throat became bluish. Ever since that time, Lord Shiva is known as Nalini Kanta. Nalini means blue and Kanta means throat. So that which would have destroyed all living beings within the universe, it had no more negative effect on the all-powerful Lord Shiva than that it tinged his throat slightly blue. And Lord Shiva, for his part, was so pleased that he was able to do this service for Krishna. In the 4th canto, 3rd chapter, 23rd verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna says, Sattvam Vishudam Vasudeva Shabditam Yad Iyate Tatra Pumam Pavrita Sattvecha Tajmin Bhagavan Vasudevo Hiadokshita Me Namasa Vidite. I am always engaged in offering obeisances to Lord Vasudeva in pure Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is always pure consciousness in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, is revealed without any covering in his original internal potency. He turns at this point to his wife, Bhavani, and says, my dear, gentle wife, Bhavani or Parvati, when one performs benevolent activities for others, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is very pleased. And when the Lord is pleased, I am pleased, along with all other living creatures. Therefore, let me drink this poison, for all the living entities may thus become happy because of me. Lord Shiva is such a great Vaishnava, such a great devotee of Krishna, that he has his own sampradaya. He heads up his own line of disciplic succession. It is named after him. It is called the Rudra Sampradaya. Just as yesterday we talked about the sampradaya descending from Lord Brahma, which is called the Brahma Madhva Sampradaya. There is also the Rudra Sampradaya, which comes directly from Lord Shiva. And he's also mentioned as one of the great 12 Mahajans, the great personalities through whom we can learn all the mysteries of devotional service. Shrayambhu, Narada Shambhu, Kumara Kapiliya Manu, Pralado Janako Bijo, Bale Vyashaka Vayam. So in there we find the name Shambhu. This is a quote from the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Shiva or Shambhu is mentioned right along with Brahma, of course, Janaka, Prahlad, Bali, Shukadeva Goswami, as well as the Kumaras, Kapil, Manu, Narada Muni, and others as well. So concluding here on our Wisdom Wednesday, talking about the glories of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva personifies the words of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, Mam Chayo Vicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate Saganam Samaditaitam Brahma Bhuya Kalpate, who is unflinchingly and uninterruptedly engaged in devotional service for the Lord, achieves this purified state of mind called Vishuddha Sattva. Another name which describes Vishuddha Sattva is the Vasudev consciousness, and in that Vasudev consciousness, separated from the impulses and the causal effects of this material world, one can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead revealed in his internal potency without any material contamination or material covering. So this Vasudeva or Visuddha Sattva consciousness above the modes of material nature is the ground whereby Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is revealed free from the contamination of the material nature. That is the ground wherein one is situated in pure Krishna consciousness. The name, form, quality, pastimes, paraphernalia of the Lord, being transcendental, are beyond the scope of this material nature. It is not possible to understand or relish any of that with the materialistic senses. Therefore, when the senses are purified by service to the Lord and his devotees, by discharge of devotional service, the Lord is revealed in his original pure form without any covering. Lord Shiva is always seeing the Lord in his internal potency, and this trance-like state is called samadhi. Samadhi is not under the control of the devotee. One who is in samadhi is under control of Vasudeva. For the entire internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead acts under his orders. Our concluding statement here is that simply by hearing about Krishna and chanting about him, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, without any deviation, when the mind goes nowhere else other than to the lotus feet of Krishna and his devotees, at that point the magic begins. At that point one can realize the personality of Godhead as confirmed by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna himself in his devotional incarnation, by the bhakti yoga process, beginning with hearing and chanting about the creative potencies of the Lord. One can gradually cleanse the heart and the mind and thus clearly see the face of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That concludes our series of 3 shows this week, all of which were on the same verse, which is the 30th verse in the second canto, second chapter of the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. When we meet next time on Motivational Monday, it will be the auspicious occasion of Balaram Purnima, the appearance day of Lord Balaram. If you're in Utah, you're welcome to join us that evening at the Salt Lake City Temple for those auspicious observances. In the meantime, don't forget to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.